There was a time in a land far from here where a beast roamed across the hills and lurked in the dark forests. Always hungry, saliva dripped from his muzzle, and his bright yellow eyes would reflect the moonlight. He was a large and savage wolf, feared by anyone who crossed his path. And one day, the beast came across the town of Gubbio. He saw that the town had lots of fat and sleepy sheep grazing in the fields outside the city walls. Being the fierce predator that he was, he would charge out from behind the cover of the woods and snatch up one of the sheep whenever it pleased him. The poor shepherd, looking after the sheep, would try to scare the menacing beast away, but nothing he did worked. The beast was too fast. Finally, the shepherd pleaded for the mayor of the town to help. So the mayor declared that he would send his best knight to find and slay the wolf. The knight had never been defeated in battle, and he was a skilled hunter. That afternoon, the knight put on his armor and his helmet, and he left the town carrying his sword and shield. At dusk, the townspeople could hear shouting and the clashing of metal coming from the woods. Then quiet. Finally, after many hours, the knight found his way back home and collapsed before the city gate. When the people finally woke him up, he explained to them that he had met and fought the beast. It had stalked him for hours once he entered the trees, but he only ever saw it lurking in the shadows from the corner of his eye. He told them that he tracked the wolf, but the brush pulled at his arms, weighed down by the shield and sword he carried, and that his armored boots sunk deep into the mud. Finally, when the knight was so tired he could hardly lift his sword, the wolf suddenly leapt onto his back. He told the people that he had struck at the wolf again and again, but his sword could never seem to pierce its hide. But the beast had sharp claws and a strong jaw, and his teeth tore through the knight's armor and bit into flesh. Wounded and exhausted, the knight fled for his life, unable to harm the beast. Now after this, everyone in the town of Gubbio was afraid. They kept the gates closed and hid behind the city walls. No one went out to farm or to trade or do anything else. And all the while, the wolf lurked outside in the nearby woods, watching and waiting for anyone to dare to leave the city. After some time, a holy man wandering up the road arrived at the gate of the city. This man was named Francis, and he lived a simple life among the poor, trusting that God would take care of him. The people, shocked at his arrival, quickly opened the gate and closed it behind him. When Francis noticed how scared everyone was, he felt moved to help them and stated that he would leave in the morning, go into the woods, and see if he could find this wolf. The next morning, the townspeople followed him to the city gate and wished him well before returning to their homes to hide. They were worried that this simple man who had nothing but the clothes on his back stood no chance against such a powerful animal. But Francis simply made the sign of the cross and left the city. Then Francis entered the woods as the knight had done and wandered among the trees. Without weapons and armor, he was able to walk easily along the forest floor for hours. Finally, the beast grew impatient and rushed out of the shadows with his teeth bared. But Francis only turned to the wolf and again made the sign of the cross, at which point the charging beast slowed down and instead merely treaded up to Francis and laid down at his feet. Francis then spoke to him, saying, "Brother Wolf, you have done much evil in this land, killing God's creatures without permission and even attacking humans. All of the townspeople have become your enemies because of what you have done. But I will make peace between them and you. Oh, brother wolf, if you would quit attacking them, they could forgive you and no longer harass you. And if you are willing to make peace, I promise that the townspeople will feed you and look after you, so that you will no longer be hungry. But you must promise to never attack any animal or human again." The wolf agreed and placed his paw in Francis's outstretched hand, and the oath was made. After this, Francis brought the hungry animal before the astonished townspeople and made the same deal with them. When Francis left the town of Gubbio, the wolf happily stayed behind and was looked after for the rest of his life. It's little wonder that someone like Francis is so venerated in our time. Like the townspeople of Gubbio, we seem to be at war with nature. We dump billions of tons of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, rushing past every tipping point we're given, merely to enjoy the luxuries and conveniences provided by cheap energy. Our insatiable hunger for meat leads to the almost incalculable pain of nearly 10 billion farm animals in the U.S. every year. In the name of efficiency and low costs, these animals live brief, tortured lives of permanent confinement and filth. Temperatures rise, natural disasters grow more common each year, species go extinct, water levels rise. The beast attacks again and again, and we hide behind the city gates in denial. Of course we crave the witness of Francis, someone able to embody a balanced and mutually beneficial relationship with nature that recognizes the inherent goodness of a creation lovingly brought into existence by God. Unlike the knight, Francis does not strike at nature with the sword in an attempt to subject it to his own will, nor does he rely on the protection of armor forged from hoarded wealth or well-funded pension plans. Many of us seem to almost instinctively gravitate towards St. Francis as a symbol of a better way. And yet, it has been observed that if St. Francis is the most venerated of the saints in our time, he is also the least emulated. Sarah Coakley points out that while we are titillated intellectually by antique aesthetic rigor, self-indulgence tends to win the day. Asceticism has become voyeuristic, something to study but not actually do. And that's the danger with a merely romantic view of Francis as nothing more than patron saint of backyard gardens. We cannot escape the fact that it is what Francis gave up that allowed him to be so open to God's relationship in creation and in the faces of the poor and the sick. God called Francis to rebuild the church, and he discovered that to answer such a call meant he had to deny himself the wealth, comfort, and glory that was offered to him by the world. Room in his heart had to be made for the birds and the wolves, the sun and the moon. Like Francis, the world also offers us the opportunity to pursue soft and easy lives and to grasp for influence and recognition instead of working towards holiness and justice. We can claim positions for ourselves as respectable chaplains of the American experiment, and we can dedicate our work to making Christianity intelligible to a culture of consumption that sees religion as just another possible vehicle for self-improvement. Or, like Francis, we can follow in the path of self-denial. Now, many will wince at that word. It sounds so negative. But, of course, for a society in which the individual is defined by what they consume, To choose not to consume cannot be anything but negative, an absence, a void of meaning. After all, a knight without his sword is an absurdity. But what Francis witnesses to is that self-denial is anything but a void of meaning. It is in self-denial that we can let go of all the things preventing us from true holiness, all the things that blind us from the reality of this world. Jesus promises us that his yoke is easy and his burden light. And when we've dropped our swords of greed and hatred, we'll find our burden to indeed be lightened. And when we've removed our helmets of self-interest that block our vision, we'll finally be able to see how Jesus has infused every atom of creation with beloved meaning. We'll be able to embrace the wolf and the stones as our brothers, and the birds and the streams as our sisters. If we but ask, the Holy Spirit will also equip us to follow Francis in the way of Jesus and to make peace with our own wolves.